Hello and welcome to Sound of Truth. This is episode number 24. On this episode, we're going to talk to my longtime friend, David Rice. Prior to that, we'll have a little Bible discussion from Deuteronomy chapters 18 through 26. But that will be after a brief time of chit-chat, which is coming right up on this edition of Sound of Truth.
So chit-chat, what you got?
Well, I know people are flying a lot more now. We're coming out of this pandemic. And question.
Yeah.
Aisle seat or window seat? Which do you prefer?
Aisle seat or window seat? When I first started flying, I had no clue. And everybody that I worked with was one, and I naturally went the other way. So I'm a rebel. Yeah. I'm a window seater, 100%.
So you're about the flight, the experience of flight, rather than the convenience of the
correct.
The aisle seat.
Consider it was when I started flying for work. It was a relatively new experience. If I had my way, I would just stay in Florida forever.
Yeah, that's right. You're a homebody.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I started having to travel, I was like, okay, well, now I'm doing this thing I've never done. What should I do? Mm-hmm. And I always gravitated towards the window seat. Although everybody was like, what are you doing? You always get the aisle seat. I'm like, why? And, they're all like,
convenience to the bathroom.
You can get up and go to the bathroom. You can
get off the plane quicker.
In and off the plane. You can wait, right, to get onto the plane last, because who cares? You're on the aisle seat. You're not going to be bumping anybody.
Sometimes a little more stretch out space for one of your legs.
100%. You get a little bit more kind of like, you can have way more room.
So if I'm stuck with an aisle seat, those are the benefits. But I'm like you. I prefer the window seat. I really enjoy seeing out the window. I enjoy controlling the amount of light come in. Yeah.
Let there be shade.
Right, yeah. And then if you're needing a nap, it's easier to nap on that because you can lean against the wall that's curving right beside you with the tubular design of the...
Yeah, consider being the guy on the aisle and you want to take a nap in that bright light from that window. Mm-hmm. I could just close the window. No, sorry, you're not the window seater.
Go to sleep. Yeah, you're...
Yep.
Sometimes people ask you to. I'll go about halfway.
Excuse me, did you get the window seat? Yeah. I'm controlling this.
Right. Now, I will say this. Sometimes the views are incredible. It's the miracle of flight. Think of how many people before us, generations of people who never got the experience of the miracle of flight. I mean, you're sitting in it, like one comedian I heard say on this subject one time, we ought to be in awe every time we fly instead of having this complaining attitude like, this coffee's not good or whatever. The miracle flight, we're sitting in a chair in the sky.
Yeah.
Going 300-400 miles per hour. I mean, it is miraculous. It's incredible in human history.
No, you're exactly right. And I was always struck. When I first started flying, the takeoff, of course, I was that guy. My phone is out recording the takeoff. Yeah. I'm in the clouds. I'm recording the clouds as we're coming down, especially at night.
Yeah.
And you're coming down into one of these airports and you're seeing all the lights of civilization, the streets, the downtown areas. Like, these are views that humans for thousands and thousands and thousands of years would have never seen. Mm-hmm. And we get it, and it's become a common thing. Now, some people would rather have the aisle seat and not see any of that so they can go to the restroom real quick and not have to go through it. It's funny that the convenience completely takes away the what's the word? The convenience of it overshadows the awe. The awe-inspiring.
It's funny the generational difference here with our ages, because I thought it just jumped out at me. First time I flew, had my phone out. And I'm like, right. I flew so many times before I even owned a cell phone, which my kids this week said to me, Dad, they're not called cell phones. They just call them phones.
Just phones now, Dad.
I mean, that's the difference between the cell phone and the landline, but not in their minds anymore. Yep. Just a phone. All right, let's come back in just a minute. We're going to have a Bible discussion. That was fun.
That was good.
I enjoyed it.
Come on.
All right, so we are in Deuteronomy 18 through 26.
18 through 26.
And as usual, kind of one of those things you always have to say, there's a lot going on here, so we get to cherry pick. So I'm going to start out.
Okay.
One of the things that jumped off the page at me, chapter 20. We're going to chapter 20. It's talking about, the title here is The Regulations Concerning War. But some of these, he starts to give reasons why some people who are in the army might be given leave. Mm-hmm. And this was just so interesting to me. So I'm just going to read this off and let's just kind of see where the conversation goes.
Okay.
Chapter 20, verse 5. Then the officers of the army must address the troops and say, "Has anyone here just built a new house, but not yet dedicated it? If so, you may go home. You might be killed in the battle, and someone else would dedicate your house." Verse 6.
Mm-hmm. That's always fascinating.
"Has anyone just planted a vineyard, but not yet eaten of any of its fruit? If so, you may go home. You may die in battle, and someone else would eat the first fruit." I'm going to pause there, because one of the things, and I think it was in Ecclesiastes, that really struck me from that book was, and I don't have it memorized, but it's coming to me right now. There's this sense that one of the greatest evils that could happen is that you would work your whole life for anything. And I think in the situation that was in the book was you'd work your whole life to kind of amass this wealth, but how evil it would be for you to work your life to amass this much wealth, and then you don't even get to enjoy it because you die and it doesn't get passed on to your kids. It gets passed on to some other person somehow. And
I'm thinking about Jesus and how he said, that you work to amass all this wealth and riches, and then your life's taken from you. You didn't even get to step in to enjoy it. He says, "You fool."
Yeah,
right?
He talks about it in a foolish way because the man wasted his life. But I think
So are you saying you think
angle,
that this is a provision that is being made to say, you're working towards something. We want you to be able to enjoy the blessing of that before you go off and risk your life.
There is this big sense in the Old Testament, I would imagine, so that the Jews themselves had this sense that you should be able to enjoy the
fruit of your labor.
The fruit of your labor. You just bought a new house. Go home and enjoy it. Don't come to war. We understand. The Lord will provide. The Lord's going to protect. God has given you a new house. Go and enjoy this blessing that God's given you. You just planted a vineyard. Go enjoy that vineyard. Be the one who gets to take in the first fruits. What a blessing that is from the Lord. Go. And you don't have to fight. That just strikes me. And then there's another one. It keeps going. "Has anyone here just become engaged to a woman but not yet married her? You may go home and get married. You might die in the battle and someone else would marry her." That's the same sort of thing. Like, this is a blessing the Lord has given you. Yeah. Go marry her. And then it takes
Live a little bit before you possibly die.
Yeah. Be blessed.
It's like the Make-A-Wish Foundation
has given you a blessing. How about you go use it?
The Make-A-Wish Foundation type thing.
Yeah.
I mean, really sad circumstances. People probably, many cases, these folks maybe have a shorter life or they're not going to live. So it's like, let's let them go enjoy something they've really wanted to do.
Right.
Wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Reminds me of that. And we know you're going to go to battle and you may die. We want to make sure you get to enjoy what you've worked for, what was just around the corner for you before you go do that.
And you get this big sense, I think, throughout the whole Old Testament, but it really comes out. I mean, it's just kind of explicitly stated. Go enjoy this. Then the officers.
So God's not a killjoy.
No. Yeah. If anything, he's like, I've given you a blessing. I want you to go use it. I've given you gifts. Don't just waste them. Go take advantage of your gifts.
Yeah.
Then come fight. Come up. Then
so to balance that with the calling of self-denial.
Yeah.
The self-denial for Jesus doesn't mean you don't get to enjoy anything.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What else you got from this section?
I was just going to say, if anyone here was afraid or worried, you may go home before you are frightened, before you frighten anyone else. That's another thing.
The contagion of, shall we say, they used to have a term. This will appeal to your redneck side of you. He's yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah, he's yellow. The coward.
Yellow
Cowardice.
Belly. Yeah.
Kenny Rogers had a song, "The Coward of the County." Did you ever hear that country song?
That one I don't know.
Go on YouTube and listen to the story of the Coward of the County. It's one of those country songs that's a story, like a lot of them are. But we don't want your cowardice to spread. A little leaven, can ruin the whole lump.
Right.
So it's better you just go on home rather than we force you. It seems like in military movies when I was growing up, you got to do this. You may be scared, but we're going to force you out there on the battlefield or whatever.
I've heard of George Washington. Like, if anybody runs from the battle, you will be executed.
Yeah.
Because if that spreads throughout the entire army, we've lost this war. We cannot have cowardice.
So they're nipping it in the bud right at the beginning.
And it was funny. He's like, hey, if you're scared, go home.
Yeah.
So you'd imagine some people are scared and they leave, and then what does that do? Like, like look at that coward. Like now, he's,
I wonder if they're branded for life, though. If it's one of those things they go back. And
whether literally or societal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like a shaming thing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a shame thing. Mm-hmm. But all right. So hit me with your. You'd mentioned something about curses.
So chapter 27. Mm-hmm. There is this section, curses from Mount Ebal. Verse 9 and following. This is fascinating. Verse 10, obey the Lord your God and follow his commands and decrees that I give you today. On the same day, Moses commanded the people. When you've crossed the Jordan, these tribes shall stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people. And he lists the tribes. And these tribes shall stand on Mount Ebal to pronounce curses. And then he lists those tribes. The Levites shall recite it to all the people of Israel in a loud voice. So they're shouting this out. Cursed is the man who carves an image or casts an idol, a thing detestable to the Lord, the work of the craftsman's hands, and sets it up in secret. Cursed is the man. All the people shall shout, Amen. Mm-hmm. Cursed is the man who dishonors his father or his mother. All the people shall shout Amen. Mm-hmm. Cursed is the man who moves his neighbor's boundary stone, and all the people shall shout Amen. He goes through these list of things. If you do these things, well then, cursed are you. Mm-hmm. We're pronouncing curses on you if you do this stuff.
Right.
Implied, and perhaps this has come down through history in this fashion to where when I hear this, I'm thinking it's almost like a superstitious pronouncement upon a person that bad things are it's like a bad omen type thing. Bad things are going to happen to you if you do this stuff. So it's almost like this bad omen or this. So the question I have that I'm not certain I know the answer to at this point in time. Is it just the natural consequences of doing these bad things, or are they pronouncing a curse to say, if you do this in the supernatural realm, in the spiritual realm,
there's something happening in a spiritual realm that we might not be able to see physically, but it is the repercussions of what you're doing.
I'm leaning toward that second option increasingly because I think the first option, it's the natural consequences of you do bad these things. It tends to lead toward these things, like pick out whatever it is. So, as an example, you could do any number of things. If you eat tons of greasy food, you get high cholesterol.
That was the first thing that came to my mind. If you eat a lot of food, you're going to put on a lot of weight.
Yeah, or your heart arteries are going to harden. You'll be at risk for heart disease and heart attack. That's a natural consequence of that. True, that is true. I'm not sure that's what this curse is referring, though, to. I think it's more in the spiritual realm now. Mm-hmm. I think that our culture, our Western culture, we tend to think only materialistically. We don't think of the spiritual realm, that there is another dimension and world in which there's spiritual warfare. And so when he's pronouncing these curses, I think that it's more in the spiritual realm, perhaps. Definitely including the natural realm. You do these things, you'll probably... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so there is the materialistic view, which means there's only a material realm. There is no spirit or supernatural realm. And they try to explain everything through that way. And then there's what you're talking about. Well, no, there is a material realm, and there's also a spiritual realm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes things happen here that doesn't affect this, and sometimes some things happen here and that don't affect this. And I would say maybe there is a compromise where we shouldn't be making a distinction between material realm and spiritual realm. Just because all we can feel and sense is a material does not mean that the spiritual is not just as real and just as present as the material. And
So there is an interconnectedness there for sure. There is crossover there for sure.
Right.
And
this is all new to me too. Like, I don't know if I have I'm not solid on this, but I think I would lean towards both. Mm-hmm. Whatever happens, like the same analogy, if you eat a bunch of food, your physical body will get unhealthy, right? But I would say that's also in the spiritual. If you're eating a lot of food, there's no discipline, there's no self-control. Just as your physical self is not healthy, your spiritual self is also not healthy. They are one and the same.
Well, and then you get the crossover to the whole subject of spiritual warfare. Mm-hmm. And in the Gospels, we see that there's a connectedness between demonic activity and influence and physical repercussions for people
100%.
in regard to that.
Yeah. The woman is bent over for, I think, 18 years, and she
Mhm.
can't stand up. There wasn't a physical explanation for that. It was a demonic oppression that when that demon was cast out, she could stand up. But what doctor would have been like, oh, yeah, there's a spirit. Let me test this, your knee. Let me take your blood sample. Yep, there's a demon.
And in the Gospels also, we have an example of is both a physical disease and it's demonic in origin, the two combined. So there is the connectedness. So I think the curse is both natural consequences will happen that are negative because you're doing these things, but also there's warfare going on in the spiritual realm. And if you pursue these areas of disobedience, you're opening up yourself to demonic attack in the spiritual realm. That's part of the curse. So the good news is the curse can be lifted through Jesus Christ.
Oh man, and to go exactly with what you're saying, in chapter 21, verse 23 in this section, this was the one that really kind of like took me straight to Jesus. It talks about various regulations. In verse 22, in chapter 21, verse 22 and 23, if someone has committed a crime worthy of death and is executed and hung on a tree, the body must not remain hanging from the tree overnight. You must bury the body that same day, for anyone who is hung is cursed in the sight of God. Jesus was hung on a tree for us.
Yes. Parenthetically, a little caveat here. I remember growing up in the news, whenever someone famous in Israel would die, like a leader, like the Israeli premier assassinated or whatever, they buried him that day. That's different from our culture where we go through this process and maybe a few days later they're buried. No, they buried him that day. That's still in the Jewish culture today. Because
there's this idea of defilement.
Yeah.
And we're here talking about, whenever I read this, I always thought somebody was hanging from the neck, who's hung on a tree. And that could be what he's talking about here. But Jesus was literally hung by nails on a cross, wood.
Tree, yeah, made of wood.
Made of wood. He hung on a tree, became the curse for us, taking our curse so that we could be blessed, right? So that our curse could be taken away, and instead we are given God's favor, given God's blessing. So we get all these ideas of God's cursing and cursing and cursing and cursing, and sometimes you could go through that list and be like, man, I've done that.
Yeah.
I've made, maybe not a literal idol, but I've definitely made an idol in my life of something. I've disobeyed my parents, right?
Dishonored them, etc. Yeah.
Right.
We've all sinned.
I'm cursed.
We're all under this curse of disobedience and sin.
Jesus took that curse. He became that curse for us.
Amen. Great thing to end on. All right, take a break. Come back, talk to David Rice.
I am a stranger in this land, but I won't be here long, so I might as well stay.
All right, hey, we've got our guest on the phone with us, my longtime friend, Rick's new friend, David Rice. David and I met in college, and we've kept up through the years. David, good to have you on Sound of Truth.
Oh, it's good to be with you.
David is, as I mentioned, a longtime friend of mine. He is married, met his wife overseas, and they have 2 teenage boys. And David is currently living here in the States. So he agreed to come on the program. And David, I'm going to hand the mic off to you in just a second here. What we usually do is we ask our guests to share their testimony, how they came to faith in Christ, and then since they came to faith in Christ, their God story since then. But let's start off with just kind of give us your background a little bit and story of how you came to faith in Christ, David. Good to have you on the program today.
Good to be here. Well, actually, coming to Christ, I probably got the most boring story as far as that goes. I was born in a Christian home, and I was raised to love God. And then about the age of 5, I understood that I was a sinner, and I understood that needed to be taken care of, and I took care of it. As this boat trailer goes by me back there. And so I came to Christ at the age of 5.
Now, 5 years old. Well, let's dig into that just a little bit. You said you took care of it. Now, for clarity for our audience sake, for some people that means, so he went and got baptized, or so he knew he needed to get things right, so he joined the church. Could you go into a little more detail there of what you mean by you had it taken care of?
Or he just prayed a prayer. There you go. Prayed a prayer, took care of it.
Well, yeah. I was going to bed at night. My mother put us to bed every night, read the Bible story to us, and I prayed and asked God to forgive me of my sins, made him Lord of my life. Really, before then, I would have said he was Lord of my life. But there's a sin thing that was there. The Bible teaches that all of sin fallen short of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death. And, that death part doesn't sound very good. And you love God, so just pray and ask him to forgive you of your sins. And really, honestly, yes, that is the point where I officially asked Jesus to be Savior of my life. But, I believe that I was saved, I am being saved. That and the Bible teaches we continually work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And so, that was the beginning of really my salvation experience, honestly.
It's when you were justified before God and your name was written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and your destiny was settled. So
that journey of sanctification began on that day.
Mm-hmm.
It did, yes, at 5 years of age. So, I look back on that, and that's exactly what happened. And a lot of the grief that you get when you come to faith at age 5, or you accept Christ at age 5, is people say, well, you were just raised to do that, And honestly, I thank God he gave me plenty of opportunities to walk away in my life, And there were plenty of opportunities to walk away, and he just held me firm.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
It was no longer my parents' faith. It was no longer the faith that I grew up being taught to have. It was the faith that was genuine and real for myself, you know.
Right.
And I think that's a very important transition to go into,
So my wife shares a similar testimony of coming to faith very young, comparatively to perhaps most of us. I think she was 6 years old. And then when she was in her teens, she wrestled through, was that real? Was that authentic? Did I know what I was doing? All those type of questions that so often come to children who are raised in godly homes and when they're taught to love Jesus and then they embrace Christ at an early age. Did you go through that as well, David? Did you have any season in your teen years or college years where was this really my faith, or was this just my parents' faith?
Not really. I didn't go through questioning if it's my faith or my parents' faith. Part of it is that, I wasn't I grew up in a Christian home, but I also grew up in the 80s music scene. Call it hair metal, call it whatever you will, but in the 80s, from my early teen years all the way up into through college, actually, my brother was on tour with Motley Crue, Poison, Def Leppard, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest. I mean, wow. I went to see Motley Crue with Mom and Dad. They wanted to see my oldest brother, and so I grew up in that scene. And being a drummer, I grew up in Western North Carolina. I went to school with Squire Parsons' daughter, and some of my childhood friends were in quartets and things like that. And it was the Southern gospel capital of the world. And I hated that music. It did not express who I was. And
gotcha.
For me, it was, and it's great. I know a lot of people that worship the Southern gospel. I'm not knocking it. It's just not me,
right.
Mm-hmm. And, for about 10 years there, I was going to hell because it wasn't me. Everybody was like, you like Christian rock? And I was like, but, I was put into a world where I really wasn't accepted by the church because I did like rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, that's really when my faith started becoming my faith.
Yep.
Because I knew God saved me. I knew God was real. I'd seen God working. And he just wouldn't let me go. Mm-hmm. You can imagine when you're around the music scene like that you have ample opportunity to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And it honestly, it never. I thought about being in a band, and later on, I felt called to missions. Third grade, and that I did struggle with that. Do I be a missionary, or do I? God gave me a talent with music. Do I pursue music? And I always wanted to do it for Him. And I was like, do I pursue music or do I be a missionary? And about ninth grade, I made a trip with my uncle, who was a missionary to Korea at one time. I made a trip with him to Korea, and I remember sitting in a Bible study one night, and I didn't understand a word of what was being said in there. And, God just spoke to me and said, you see all these people? None of them would be here today if it wasn't for somebody that went to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, looking at it, look back, and I'd go to concerts because I get back passes and laminate passes. I didn't have to pay for tickets. If I could go, like with Poison, they gave me a permanent backstage pass for any of their tours. I just show up and I could walk in wherever they are in the world,
Wow.
And I remember going to some of these concerts, and the one band that really stuck out to me was Guns N' Roses. And they got up and they would say the same thing just about every stinking show.
Wow. Hey, let me interrupt you for just a second, David. We need to take a quick break, and this will leave us with a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Right. We're going to hear what they would
what they would say every single time.
Right.
So we'll be back in just a few seconds. More with David Rice. Okay, we have David Rice on the phone, longtime friend of mine, and he was sharing his testimony, and you were just telling we left it on a cliffhanger here. So let's pick up where you left off with what on earth was Guns N' Roses saying at every concert that was really getting under your skin?
Well, Guns N' Roses actually they were on stage performing. They were opening for Motley Crue. Their Appetite for Destruction album had not come out yet. And, the record labels, or the labels decided that they were going to be the next big thing. And usually that's what happens. The big bands were decided by the labels. But their album hadn't even been out yet. And everybody was talking about them. And they get up and say, why don't you guys come to see us in Charlotte on Thursday or whatever day it was going to be? Because MTV is going to be there to videotape us to go live. Or, going to be there to film us or whatever. And afterwards, I was talking to my brother, and I was like, MTV's going to film them? He goes, I have no idea what he's talking about. And I just, it's just so disingenuous that, you would say things like that in a concert. And then you think about it, you got a set list. You've got all of these songs that are in a row that you play them the same arrangement every night, the same motions in between the songs and things like that.
Yep.
And I was just like, that would get old,
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't know that I want to spend my life working an hour a night playing the same thing over and over. I love to play drums, but I think probably after a month, I'd get tired of playing the same songs over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was, that was, one of the critical points where I was like, I don't want to do this.
So just to clarify for me, I was getting a little confused here. They would say the same thing I was waiting for this one-liner thing.
No.
But you're saying literally they say the same thing every night, all the stuff they say.
And I think a part of me can relate to what you're talking about here, David. A part of my job is I will do some training for our customers. And I've got that training down where I say, I already know what's the most efficient way to explain this. What's the best way to show and display this? What's the best way to answer a question like this? And I'm telling you, I can do that presentation with my eyes closed, hands tied behind my back. I can do that, and I will sound the exact same yesterday, today, tomorrow. I will say the same joke with the same intonation, with the same delivery. And I'm telling you, I get where you're going with that, David. You're just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just like, I want more meaning in my life than doing that,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, you fast forward, from that time, probably about 15 years, and I'm in seminary, and I'm working in a print shop. This guy comes in, sees me banging on something, goes, "You're a percussionist, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "You ever thought about doing anything with it?" And I basically just told him everything that I just told you.
Right.
He goes, "There's more to that than that." And I was like, "Not really." And he goes, and we had a conversation for about 15 minutes about music. And when he left, I said, "Man, that guy sure knew a lot about music." And my coworker looked at me, rolled his eyes, and goes, "Yeah, because he's in the Grateful Dead." And
Oh, wow.
it was Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead that I was standing there talking to, telling him how meaningless his life is.
Oh, goodness.
That's a good story.
And I love music. I still love music. In fact, with my son, I'm encouraging him to pursue a music career.
Mm-hmm.
And I just told him, I said, music can have the most impact of any medium out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. If you have a movie without music, it's not a good movie. And so music is the most powerful medium out there. You just have to hone it and use it for the glory of God.
Right.
You can bring around major change in culture and society with music. And so, yeah, I'm not anti-music industry. It just wasn't where God had me,
Where did God have you?
Well, God, I will tell you, I believe very firmly that I was created for nothing other than being a missionary. That's who I am. I'm cross-cultural as can be. My wife is not white. I'm white. My kids are half white, and they don't act white. That's who I am. And I don't think I was created for anything else.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome to know this is what I was meant to do on this earth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the greatest joys I've had have been, seeing people come to Christ and, come from not knowing anything about God
Mm-hmm.
to faith in God, to sharing Christ with their friends. There was a guy that, when I met him, he was 17 years old, and that lazy kid, the country we were in, there was, they had military training that the kids would have to do, and he didn't have to do it because they didn't have a uniform that would fit him. And, he prayed to receive Christ and went about a month and didn't, then he comes back and goes, I don't believe in Jesus anymore. I thought, why? He goes, well, I prayed. I said, well, that usually helps people believe in Jesus. He goes, well, I prayed for a lot of money and a beautiful girlfriend. And I looked at him, I said, Kevin, I said, you know what? I said, you're fat and you're lazy. I said, and to ask for a beautiful girlfriend and a lot of money, like a raise the dead request. God can do it. He just doesn't hand it out every day,
Uh-huh.
And I said, you've not been discipled. And he comes and agrees to be discipled. And I baptized him, and almost a year to the day that I baptized him, I stood on the banks of the river and I watched him baptize 5 of his friends that he had led to Christ.
Mm.
Wow.
And he went on to lead the foreign English teacher that came to town to Christ. The guy came to this country because he wanted to learn more about Buddhism. He didn't speak the local language. He runs into my friend. His English name is Kevin, and Kevin speaks English, and Kevin shares with him. He leads the guy to Christ. He hands him his English Bible. He calls me and says, I need another English Bible. I had to give mine away.
That's fabulous.
That is awesome.
That is wonderful.
And then he leads like this 70-something-year-old lady that lives next to his mother to Christ. And in that culture, young people don't have influence over old people.
Right.
And he's leading so many people to Christ. And I look back and I said, man, that's what life is about,
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, it's just amazing to be able to see that.
It's a blessing to be able to see the fruit of your work. Mm-hmm. And there are some times where maybe we will never see our fruit up until heaven.
Yeah.
But how much of a blessing is it from the Lord to say, hey, you've been faithful, and I'm going to let you see the fruit of the work that you've been doing.
That's so true.
Oh, man, it was a blessing. And you know what was even more beautiful was after the baptism, I took them all out to eat. And the guys he baptized looked at me and goes, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
I'm your spiritual grandpappy.
That's what I said. I said, "You can call me Grandpa."
There you go.
I beat you to it.
That's awesome.
That's amazing, man.
And I was so happy because it was like, my faith had become my faith and not the faith of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
That showed me that Kevin's faith was Kevin's faith and not my faith.
There you go.
Wow, if that's not a perfect kind of circling back to what we had talked about opening this interview, that's amazing. And David, that is an awesome testimony. We are so grateful for you to be able to share that with us, and I know that's going to be such a blessing and an encouragement to a lot of the people who are watching and listening now.
Well, David has agreed to let us interview him again, so that'll be next week on next week's episode. But David, thanks for being on this week. We look forward to sharing you being able to share more next week with our audience as well. So, but that's going to be it for this edition of Sound of Truth. Join us again next week. We'll talk more about the Bible. We'll have a little more chit chat, and also we'll hear more from David Rice. God bless.
He knew there was something